We welcome you to the program today. Job chapter 21, verses 1 to 16. We'll be looking at the first half of the chapter today. Chapter 21, verses 1 to 3, Job appeals for a hearing. Verse 1, Then Job answered and said, this is Job's response in Job 21, which marks the end of the second round of speeches. Verse 2, Listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. Earlier, Eliphaz said the friends tried to gently console or comfort Job. He also claimed that their words were the consolations of God. He mocked Job by asking him if these consolations or comforts were too insignificant for him. Back in Job 15:11, are the consolations of God too small for you and the words spoken gently with you? Job now uses the same word, consolation. He admonishes his friends to listen carefully to his speech and let his speech be their consolation, their comfort. Verse 3, Bear with me that I may speak, and after I have spoken, keep mocking. Job appeals to his friends to bear with him or to be patient with him so that he may speak. Then, after he has spoken, they may proceed to keep mocking him. So first, Job is saying, first listen to me, bear with me for a time, and then after you've heard me, then you can return to mocking. It's sad that these friends mocked Job during his deepest grief and suffering. Some suggest that Job is particularly addressing Zophar in this passage. Verses 4 to verse 16, verses 4 to 16, he describes the wicked experience prosperity. And so, yes, the wicked do experience prosperity. Verses 4 to 16. Verse 4, he says, As for me, is my complaint against man? And if it were, why should I not be impatient? Job asks if his complaint is against man. If his complaint were against man, he says that he would have cause to be impatient, angry. However, Job's complaint is really against God. He believes that he is innocent, and yet he continues to suffer. Note for a moment the term impatient. Job was impatient in one sense. He did not endure the suffering without complaint. The term translated here as impatient is defined by Mounce's dictionary as to be short, by extension, to be impatient, angry. Earlier, Eliphaz in Job 15:12 to 13, and Bildad in Job 18:4, both charged Job with being angry. Think about all that Job suffered, his grief and affliction. Job's friends should have been more understanding, particularly given his grief and suffering. He is supposed to be their friend, after all. Think of all the anguish that Job experienced, and yet his friends mock and continue to mock him. Job, however, was patient in another sense. Job was patient in that he persevered, he endured. He would not turn away from God and his faith in him. He believed. He continued to believe despite the suffering. And in that sense, he was patient. He is an example of perseverance. He held to his integrity. Yes, he complained about his situation. Think of all that he went through. Did he not have reason to complain? But we see despite his great suffering, he endured and he persevered and he continued to seek God and hold to his integrity. Verse 5. Look at me and be astonished. Put your hand over your mouth. Job says for his friends to look at him and be astonished. He calls for them to pay attention to what he is about to say and to be silent. Put your hand over your mouth. Be silent. Earlier, Job said that the upright is astonished at what happened to him. The suffering of an upright and righteous, innocent man. Job 17 and verse 8, upright men are astonished at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the hypocrite. Some versions read appalled. And so the upright look at Job and how he suffered. An innocent man, a righteous man suffering, and they would be appalled. Verse 6. Even when I remember, I am terrified, and trembling takes hold of my flesh. Job says that when he thinks or meditates, when he remembers, when he contemplates what has happened to him, he is terrified and his body shakes, trembles. This may be the thought of what he thinks God has done to him. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. There is the perseverance of Job. Job 21 and verse 4. Verse 7. Why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. The friends of Job argue that the wicked die prematurely. You can look back at Job 5:26, 15:33, and 20, verse 11. Those are some of the passages where his friends made the argument of how the wicked suffer. And they argued that they always suffer. But do they always suffer? Job 20:11, his bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust. There's one of the three passages that I mentioned. Job contradicts, though, what his friends said. Job begins by asking why the wicked live and become old. There are times, and perhaps all too often, that the wicked live and continue to live and become old. They live to an old age, despite their wickedness. And not only do the wicked sometimes live to old age, they become mighty in power. Sometimes they become even stronger. Why is that, friends? Verse 8, he continues, their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Job points out that sometimes it's the case that the descendants of the wicked live to see their children established and live to see their children have children themselves. They live to see their children's children and see them grow. Think of Job's grief as he's even mentioning this. as he said these words, given the loss of his own children. Job 1, verses 18 to 19. So Job points as evidence experience of what he has witnessed. It's not always the case. Sometimes the wicked, they not only have children, but their children have children, and they continue on. They get to see them grow up, to be established, have children of their own. Bildad said how the wicked will come to an end with no children or future generations. Now, that might be true some of the time, but not all the time. Job 18 and 19, he said, he has neither son nor posterity among his people, nor any remaining in his dwellings. Job contradicts what Bildad said in Job 18:19. He points to experience, what he has seen. Verse 9. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. He says that the houses, the homes of the wicked are safe from fear. From the way his friends talk, you think they would be living in fear. And yet, Job points out that sometimes they live in peace. Also, he said, the rod of God is not upon them. The footnote in the New King James Version reads, the rod of God's chastisement. The rod in the Bible, such as the book of Proverbs, sometimes refers to the rod in the sense of a way of disciplining children. In this case, the rod of God, and so the rod of God's chastisement. Well, God believes, or while Job believes that the rod of God is upon him, he doesn't know why, but he believes the rod of God is upon him. The wicked are not chastised. At least there are times that he sees that he does not perceive that they are chastised or disciplined. Job 9:34, let him take his rod away from me, and do not let dread of him terrify me, Job said. Eliphaz told Job about the confidence of the man who seeks God and what he can possess. He can have that confidence. Job 5:24, you shall know that your tent is in peace. You shall visit your dwelling and find nothing amiss. Job's house certainly was not at peace. His children were dead. He lost servants, he lost possessions, and he lost his children. And then, to top it all off, he lost his health. He was suffering and pain. He certainly was not at peace. Verse 10. Their bull breeds without failure. Their cow calves without miscarriage. Job now speaks of the wealth of the wicked. If you heard Job's friends talk, you would think that the wicked are never wealthy, that they never have possessions. And that's not true. Job points out this fact from experience. He begins by looking at their possessions, such as their bulls and cows, their cattle. He said their bull never fails to breed. Likewise, their cow gives birth to a calf without loss. Verse 11. Again, if you heard Job's friends talking, though they didn't mention this specifically, you would think that that they never had prosperity, but Job points out that this happens. Verse 11, they send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. Job describes how the wicked let their children frolic about like a flock of sheep in safety and security from predators. Their children dance, playfully skip about. You have this picture of them sending their children out in the yard to play. They're out there skipping about and playing out in the grass. A scene of play and carefree living. If you heard Job's friends talk, you would think that they never experienced any of this, let alone have children. Verse 12. They sing to the tambourine and harp and rejoice to the sound of the flute. Job describes the enjoyment of the wicked. Again, if you heard the friends of Job, you think they never had any joy. But Job points out this is wrong. He pictures the wicked singing to the music of the tambourine and the harp and rejoicing to the sound of the flute. Contrary to what was said by his friends, the wicked sometimes live a merry life. Verse 13, they spend their days in wealth and in a moment go down to the grave. The wicked spend their days, they live their lives sometimes in wealth. And in a moment, they die a peaceful death. They go down to the grave, all without suffering. Job points to experience. He's seen this in this world. Again, if you heard Job's friends speak, you would think that the wicked live their days, short life, suffering, and then finally, after a long time of suffering, they die. That's not always the case. And Job points out how that some of the wicked, they live their days in wealth. They're rich sometimes, and in a moment, they go down to the grave. They die a quick death. We might say an easy death. This word grave is from a Hebrew term Sheol, and sometimes it's left untranslated in the Bible. Sometimes it's transliterated. You have English letters given to the Greek letters. And so the Hebrew term Sheol is translated as grave in a number of passages. Job 7:9, 14:13, 17:13, 21:13, and 24:19. And again, the same term is also left untranslated as Sheol. Job 11:8, 17:16, and 26:6. And we've mentioned this term before in our study. Verse 14. Sheol, the abode of the dead. Verse 14, yet they say to God, depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. Job describes the wicked and how the wicked enjoy the things of the world, living in profanity. He pictures the wicked as if it were telling God to go away, and how they do not want him around. They do not want to know his ways. They do not need him, and they do not want to know him. So here in this passage and following verses, he's describing the wicked, and as if they were speaking to God, saying, depart from us, and so get away from us. We do not desire the knowledge of your ways. We do not want to know about your ways, about your righteousness. And so they speak profanely. Verse 15, who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? The wicked haughtily, arrogantly mock God, saying, who is the Almighty? anyway? Who is he? They see him as being unworthy to serve. They see no profit in serving God or praying to God. As they see it, they live in prosperity. They've lived in prosperity without God. So why would they ever need him? They're materialistic, worldly, wicked. Job, on the other hand, sought out God right from the beginning. Even after he began to suffer, as he was afflicted, he continued to seek God. And he lets his friends know that he sought God. His friends talked as if Job had abandoned God, as if he had left him. That wasn't true at all. Job continued to seek God. Verse 16. Indeed, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. They accused Job of being wicked. When Job pleaded with his friends to point out his sin that merited his suffering, they did not do so. They said that Job was suffering because of his sin, and yet would not point out his sin. Verse 16, while the wicked reject God, Job knows that the prosperity of the wicked is ultimately in the hand of God. Now, the wicked don't acknowledge God or claim to have everything they have by their own power, their own might, even though in reality there's the providence of God. And so the wicked reject God, but Job points out that their prosperity is not in their own hands. Job did not share the profane position of the wicked. He rejected it. He says that the counsel of the wicked, that is, their way of life, is far from him. That didn't describe him at all. Instead, despite thinking that he is being chastised by God for, to him, some unknown reason, he still seeks after God. Job is a man of integrity, a man of perseverance, and a man of faith. Now, even though Job is such, that does not mean that at times he did not speak out of desperation. Sometimes he spoke rashly, and he acknowledges that he did so. But he continued in faith. He persevered, steadfast in faith, despite his affliction and suffering. And Job was not wicked. He described how the wicked speak of God. He was not a wicked man at all. Next time, we'll continue and finish the chapter. But for now, we'll leave it at verse 16. We hope that you'll join us for the following lesson. But in the meantime, we encourage you to continue to study God's Word on your own. Thank you for being here today.